One night some time ago, a dream came to me. There was a malignant tumor in the Earth's skin. Clouds gathered, floods threatened. It was about to spread into her veins, to poison her entire body. At the time, I had been investigating the nuclear debate for a magazine article, and it occurred to me that the tumor in my dream threatening the Earth's ecosystem represented nuclear waste. This film is about my journey to understanding what this intuitive warning was about, and how it led me to seeing a bigger picture of the choices we are making with regard to energy and power. In South Africa, our abundant coal resources and the fact that our electricity has been government subsidized has allowed for some of us to enjoy relatively cheap electricity. But our energy wealth has led us to wasteful habits, and South Africa is the biggest culprit in Africa when it comes to CO2 emissions smoking up the planet. On the other hand, 2.5 million households in South Africa do not have electricity. Most of these are the rural poor who have no access to the grid. For some time now, our government and the company who provides our electricity has focused their resources on nuclear power as the main alternative to coal for the future.
We need to build approximately 40,000 megawatts of new capacity over the next 20 odd years. If we look at what are the options for South Africa, then certainly nuclear is a part of that, and we need to investigate nuclear.
Well, in a way, nuclear energy is also clean energy.
But is nuclear energy really clean? And will it help Africa? The nuclear industry is not considered clean by environmental action groups such as Greenpeace. In order to set my mind at rest, I set off on a road trip to find out where the nuclear waste goes. On my way out of town, I met with Derek Elbrecht.
How long did you work at Coburg for?
I worked at Coburg for 8 years.
Derek's knowledge and concern about the existing nuclear waste at Coburg was troubling.
Coburg, the fuel pool has been built for the lifetime of Coburg, which is about 40 years. But what happens beyond that, and with new plants, none of us know. Government does not have a strategy to deal with that. And we're hoping that at least with current waste that are generated, we'll be able to come up with some form of solution. But for now, Cape Town must experience higher background levels of radiation in and around the Coburg area.
While the high-level waste remains in cooling pools at Coburg, the intermediate and low-level waste is taken by road to Vulpits in the Northern Cape. I followed the route the trucks take from Coburg Power Station. I had described the image of the nuclear waste as a malignant tumor in the Earth's skin from my dream to Derek. His response was quite profound.
I believe that sometimes our inner spirit is trying to tell us about something, and I think we've lost the essence of listening to our own bodies. I will not be surprised in terms of seepage that are going into the underground waters in a remote area like Namaqualand.
Driving along this slippery gravel road, I wondered if any of the trucks carrying waste had ever overturned on this route, and if so, what would it mean for livestock in the area? The manager of Vulpits had been instructed by his authorities not to grant me an interview on camera, but he led me on a conducted tour. Vulpits is designed to store low-level waste, which is gloves and overalls worn by radiation workers, and intermediate-level waste, which is the sludge from the filters of the reactor. But the manager let slip that excavation was being done to prepare for high-level waste to be buried at Val pits. Nuclear facilities have color-coded zones showing where radiation levels are higher. The manager showed me that workers wear these dosimeters on their clothes, and readings are taken at the end of each day to measure how much radiation they have been exposed to. It is recorded in a book. This is Oom Hansie, Oom Piet, and this one's Willem. Now, as in the past, the workers didn't get to see their books, but now they're allowed to see what
and they actually record the doses themselves. That is Willem's handwriting.
Okay.
The problem with reading your dosimeter is that you get carried away with the task at hand, and therefore you forget to read it at intermittent times.
This is the room where the nuclear waste is offloaded. The emergency shower is for the workers to use if they come into direct contact with the radioactive waste. One hopes a shower would be enough.
Most of us did not want to go into those zones, but there were times that you really had to go in, and during those periods you try to finish the job as quickly as possible and then run out.
Val pits workers travel in every day from neighboring communities. Norafir is a Namaqualand community 95 kilometers from the dump. The people here are descended from one of the Earth's first peoples, the Namaqualand, close farming cousins of the Khoisan. I was privileged to spend some time with them. The woman invited me to join them on their communal baking day. These people are among the 2.5 million households not connected to the national grid. Energy poverty in Africa is a cause for deforestation, runaway fires and aggravated TB among women and children from the wood smoke. Although their husbands work at the nuclear waste dump, these women do not benefit from the energy created by the nuclear power station.
Het julle elektrisiteit?
Nog niks nie.
So jy kook op die vuur altyd?
Alles. Doen ons op die vuur. Baie wyd. Ver wat ons nou met 'n stukkie hout loop om 'n regte hand te kry.
En water, waar kry julle water?
Die boorgat uit. Van Sandfontein. Ja.
So al die water kom van onder die grond?
Onder die grond.
Okay. Sê vir my, weet julle iets van Val pits, van die plek waar hulle gooi die
afvalstowwe, berging van die afvalstowwe.
Ja.
Amptelik begin so nie 80er jare het begin. Dit sou oorspronklik het vir ons gesê toe hy sal begin by die gemeenskap uitgekom, dit sou 'n natuurreservaat gewees het. Herskepingsgeleentheid vir die gemeenskap. Daar sou 'n hoërskool ook gebou gewees het. En aan die einde van die dag toe dit verkeer in kor af. Ja. Daar sit nou weer gemeenskap, die hele gemeenskap hier rondom Val pits. Ja. Is mislei. Ons was nie van die begin af reg gesê nie. Sien jy? As nou daai jaar van die apartheidswet, dis hy wat dit veroorsaak het. Want jy het nie geen sê nie, jy moet alles wat die man kom en doen, dwing net af op jou en jy moet net stil bly. Maar ek is so bly vir laat as nou nie meer by daai tyd is laat. Jy het jou sê. Ja, ek gaan nou is op.
Back in Cape Town, nuclear activist Mike Canty had told me about the apparent injustice of their situation.
These decisions were made during the apartheid era, 1986 to be precise. So they excluded the white towns, as they were then classified. Okay. And what was left over was the ancestral land of the Nama people.
Okay.
Yeah. So strictly speaking, these communities have never had the right of choice in determining whether or not they accept this particular dump site.
So, hoe lang het julle jou mense hier gewoon, weet jy?
Papa was mos 75.
Nee, dat is net my man wat daar nou.
Ja, maar Jackie is dan baie beter.
Ja, nee, Jackie is
Jackie ook
brak, ja.
Oom Japie told me that the Namaqualand have always lived there.
En wat beteken dit vir jou?
Ons kan nou nie die plek sien nie. Waar daardie klip uitslaan. Wat daar geberg word. Mis daardie klip wat sy as wat hier gekom begrawe word. Daardie houers wat hulle stuur, staan op die Godse grond. Hy staan nie op 'n sementblad nie. Hy is ook binne 'n sementmuur, binne in sementmuur en op 'n sementblad. Die moontlikheid is dat die onderaardse water word besoedeld, kan besoedeld. Die berging is oorlog. Na geheim vir die toekoms.
Japie's description of those dangerous stones refers to uranium, which fuels nuclear power. Interestingly, the elders of the Navajo tribe, another of the Earth's first peoples whose health has been severely affected by uranium mining in their homeland, say that uranium is a poison from the depths of the earth, and if it is ever brought to the surface, it will cause disharmony among the people.
Boesmanland, vat my aan. Jy my land so waar die Boesmanland lê. Boesmanland, vat my aan. Oor die diere op my spoor, waar die diere op my spoor.
If Eskom's nuclear plan goes ahead, more uranium mines will be opened up in South Africa. In 1997, a leak was reported. High values of toxic cesium-137 were found in the vicinity of the drums. Around that time, a group of workers reported that a drum containing intermediate level waste had been dropped by a crane. I asked the women of No Refuge if they knew about it.
Ek het gehoor, ja, hulle het dit self gesê, hulle het dit self genoem. Ons weet nie of die manne nou oorriders wat bestraal was nie.
Ja, of hulle nou, ja, want hulle het genoem, maar ek kan nie onthou die siekte. Dus dan weet ek ons nou nie vir hoe lang die siek in jou sit, as hy nie reg van die begin af uit jou dokter is. Helena, dat is nou onmeanderig.
The woman introduced me to two retired workers in the community who remembered the incident.
Yeah. What happened? What sort of leak was it?
Dan het ek kraak in die drum gewees. Daar het mense gekom na die drumme toe. Die van Koebergse mense. En daar gekom maar die drumme moet is toegemaak.
Ja, so het ek ook so begrawe.
So, eintlik was ons daar so 'n blokke wat ons gemaak het meter by meter hoog, meter breed. Is voor die drumme neergesit. Toe is hulle toegestort. Dit was nog raar van die jare waar jy mag mos nie sê nee nie. Jy word mos gedrywe dan. Dus dat bly dit donker.
Hendrik told me after the interview that he felt his body had been unnaturally worn down by his work at Valpits. He passed away within a year of this interview. Whether his death was hastened by his work at Valpits or not will always be a mystery.
The reality is that workers are exposed. The workers that were exposed have passed away. Recently there was a worker, a Mr. Swartz, that has passed away with his whole face being deformed as a result of exposure to radiation. In the 8 years that I was there, I knew about 15 to 20 people that died as a result of exposure. And even up to now, the company denies that these people has died as a result of that.
Over the years, various attempts have been made to do independent health studies on the workers at Valpits, Koeberg and Pelindaba, but all have been hampered by the industry's non-cooperation in making health records available for the studies. If the plans to build a series of nuclear reactors in South Africa go ahead, this dump may become a very busy place in the future. According to the manager, The geology of this site is perfect for containing radioactive waste, and there is no chance of it affecting the underground water system. But Hendrik was convinced otherwise. He had observed water rising from what he believed was an underground water artery or stream near one of the pits.
Wat ek nou net na toe kom wat vir my gesê het, hy lyk so val met sy water, so hy lê net hier. Al wat hier uitgaan, kom nie by nie en so hy kan nie besoedel al wil hy ook nog wat maak. En hy toe nie gesaak, hy toe geklim die watervlak klim. Die met hom is elke slag. So dat moes nou vir my sê, hulle lieg vir my. En dat sal ek in die hof ook sê.
Hendrik's ability to find springs of underground water comes from an ancient knowledge passed on for generations. The manager pointed out that there are measures in place to monitor the background radiation levels. Geiger counters called oximeters are placed on fences at a radius of 15 kilometers around the dump. Driving through this vast ancient landscape, all this seemed so insignificant. What is the real danger with radiation? We know that it occurs naturally and that we come into contact with it through everyday devices such as TV sets and cell phones. But why is nuclear radiation different? I asked Mike Canty about it.
We're talking about normal routine operation of a nuclear power station. You certainly are at a greater risk, statistically speaking, in the vicinity of a nuclear power station. In the reactor you get two fission products, cesium-137 and strontium-90. And the problem with those two is they stay around in the environment for a very long time. Cesium-137 has a half-life, it's half as radioactive in 30 years and strontium in 28 years. If you take the sun's rays as a form of radiation, it comes through atmosphere and lands on the earth and it can burn your skin if you're exposed too much to it. Similarly, you have some man-made source of radiation like X-ray machines. But the stuff that we're talking about is the stuff that gets inside the human body. These are bits of chemicals that get inside the body and are radioactive. And when you get some strontium into your system, it goes to the bone, seeks out the bone, and it creates problems with the T-cell production. So you get leukemias and lymphomas. With cesium-137, it actually seeks out soft tissue, so you get breast cancers, ovarian cancer, reproductive disorders.
Quebec has an emergency plan. The City of Cape Town and Eskom have to demonstrate on about every 18 months to 2 years that emergency plan is viable. So what the National Nuclear Regulator does, they don't give us any warning. They say, well, within sometime during this week, we're going to do an emergency plan exercise.
The exercise that takes place once in every 2 years around Coburg Nuclear Power Station is in fact a rehearsal for a major accident of the scale of Chernobyl. And in my experience in this particular exercise, it took 2 hours for this radiation cloud or plume to visit the center of Cape Town, Greenmarket Square. It took 2 hours to get there. Now we know from the road systems and the geography of the city of Cape Town that it is incredibly difficult to evacuate people in that time frame. If there were to be a major accident in Cape Town at Coburg Nuclear Power Station, on the scale of the accident in Russia in 1986 at Chernobyl, the whole of agricultural production would be taken out because that land would be contaminated and all the foodstuffs would be declared null and void and you could not eat them or drink the milk or the butter or the cheese, eat the butter or the cheese or anything like that. So it's a big problem for agricultural production.
Even if this seems an unlikely scenario, how can the powers that be gamble with such high stakes that could affect us all without our full consent? Do you think it's safe? Hendrik was skeptical.
As ek nog nie kan sê of ek veilig is. Kijk, ek is nou bang, die politiek is nou groot. Die politiek, jy zet hier en dan moet je later in Pretoria op zijn.
Ja.
Ja, ik ken de politiek. Ik weet in Pretoria is een beetje wijd. Ik weet ook waar ze. Ik was al wijd in hier.
My wens is dat hulle moet daai plek moet toemaak. En hulle sal gemoed moet uit hulle terugvat na hulle se gemeenskap. Hulle se gemeenskap daaronder lê nie nou versit.
On the way back from the nuclear waste dump, I visited local photographer Kolja Swartz. She showed me her slides. It seemed the nuclear waste had been hidden away under a carpet of daisies in this remote place.
In die kerk wat ek staan het, is God as ons Vader. En dit is goed so, dit werk vir baie mense. Maar ons het ook 'n moeder. Ons het 'n moeder ook in die aarde is ons moeder. Maar waar ons 'n matriargale stelsel vroeër eeue duisende jare gelede gehad het dit te verval.
When we throw something in the dustbin, we don't think about where it's going to go. And the same with the nuclear waste.
If we get no benefit out of it, why select Namaqualand to be the dumping ground?
It's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they think it's a barren place.
Well, we who live here do not consider it a dead and barren place. For us, it's very much alive. Summer and winter.
I believe the earth is an ancient living organism who sustains us and who we should revere. We need her, she doesn't need us. Like any living body, the earth thrives only if all her systems work in harmony, and she is in constant motion. A geologist once told me that continents drift at the rate of the growth of our fingernails. What I don't understand is man's presumption that by putting a container of a toxic substance like nuclear waste into the Earth's skin, it will remain neatly contained there for millions of years. What if it leaks? I am back on the Karoo farm where I grew up, and pregnant with my first child. I realize that, like the woman of no refuge, I am only a voice in the wilderness. But becoming a mother has made it seem more urgent to me to make sense of all of this. My child and generations to come will be affected by the outcomes of decisions made now. Like any mother, I want my daughter and her children to live in a healthy environment. We are now living in Johannesburg. An open day is being held for a proposed nuclear storage facility. Having got permission to attend with a cameraman, I hoped to be able to get some insight. As I was nursing on demand, I took my baby with me wherever I went. Pelindaba was the birthplace of the nuclear weapons program during the apartheid era. In those days, uranium was enriched to make fuel for Koeberg, and 6 atomic bombs were built and dismantled here before the ANC came to power. It now houses a research reactor called Safari 1, which interestingly is used for the production of medical isotopes for the treatment of cancer. When I arrived, none of the officials would grant me an on-camera interview. My cameraman recorded this incidentally.
We had a vehicle hijacked that had some radioactive material being transported. I don't know if this vehicle was ever traced.
We're the government organisation looking after the public's interest. So we're ensuring that public is safe in the vicinity of nuclear places like Koeberg. We're regulating Koeberg, Nexa and the mines.
Okay. And do you think that this pipeline is safe?
We're currently looking at the submission from the pipe store.
We're just here because it's an open day, and it's basically to collect concerns. So if there's an individual that's got a concern, this is the process. So it's part of this process, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But is it high-level waste that's been kept inside the pipe?
No, it's waste from the safari.
Is that intermediate or?
No, it's long lived.
It's long lived.
Which means what?
It's longer. It will stay active for longer than 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Short lived and intermediate level waste is up to 30 years, and then longer lived is longer than that.
Yeah. Like how long? 2 years.
Oh, you get stuff that's
up to millions.
Up to like in millions of years.
So that's how long this stuff is going to probably stay?
I'm not sure what's the inventory. That I don't know out of my head.
Okay.
So it depends on exactly what nuclides they will store there, and then you know exactly how long they will stay active.
And what is it made out of that it's going to be safe for those millions of years?
Well, the whole design.
The whole design, and also basically Earth is a barrier. There's various barriers.
Okay. Can Earth really be a barrier for this kind of toxin? Studies done on the nearby Crocodile River found unusual levels of radiation. In the neighbouring settlement of Attridgeville, I was introduced to this man. He believes that his health was damaged by the years he spent working at Pelindaba, but cannot prove it. The company refuses to pay him compensation. When an independent health study was attempted, very little conclusive evidence was found due to the fact that the industry refused to make the workers' health records available.
Studies that have been done globally, more particularly one by Elizabeth Cardis for the European Union, found very simply that when reactors went up, cancers went up, and when reactors went down, cancers went down.
On the outskirts of Pretoria is the headquarters of the PBMR company, of which Eskom holds the lion's share. The pebble-bed modular reactor is a smaller and apparently safer new kind of nuclear reactor, fueled by uranium encased in graphite balls instead of rods like they use at Koeberg. The company started off with ambitious plans of building a string of these reactors along our coast by 2016 and exporting hundreds more, but have yet to build the first one.
In terms of interest, there's been a lot of foreign interest for the pebble-bed modular reactor. The worst possible scenario, we would sell 10, and we would create 57,000 direct and indirect jobs, and that is from low skilled to very high skilled. So it's not just select. That would add 8 billion rand to GDP and 10 billion rand to export income if we were exporting.
They're absolutely fibbing, because really once you get the full costs of a nuclear project, the world's experience is that they're far higher per unit costs of electricity once you've taken into account the vast insurance costs and the costs of safeguarding against the inevitable accidents and disasters indeed that are threatened.
The other issue is in terms of its job creation potential, in terms of the permanent operation of the plant. This plant can run with 10 people, so for one plant you'll probably employ about 10 people to operate it.
At the end of the reactor's lifespan of around 40 years, the entire building becomes nuclear waste
and has to be skillfully removed and disposed of. This process is called decommissioning and can be as costly as building the plant. I asked if it had been accounted for.
The nuclear industry has to have a plan for decommissioning, and it has to have a fund for decommissioning. No other, the coal-fired energy sector doesn't have to have a fund for decommissioning and rehabilitation. The mining sector does have to have a fund for rehabilitation, but the nuclear sector has a fund for rehabilitation and decommissioning.
So has it all been worked out?
And it is calculated into the price of electricity, which is, what did we say? Between 2 and 3 US cents per kilowatt hour, which puts it on a par with our coal-fired power stations, and we are the lowest cost energy producer in the world.
The environmental cost of that cheap coal is a change of climate. One of the best arguments for changing to nuclear energy is to prevent climate change. But would it really help? I went to see Professor Thomas Alfter-Hyde at Johannesburg Technikon, an ex-member of the National Nuclear Regulator who had co-written a report on the PBMR and was an international authority on the subject.
In trying to measure the relative impact of nuclear power to global warming, you have to factor in the extent to which the support functions around a nuclear power station are fueled by fossil fuel energy as compared to nuclear power energy, particularly the steps prior to the nuclear power station itself. Those are all extremely energy intensive, and if those steps prior to the nuclear power station are in fact fueled largely by electricity coming from coal-fired and gas-fired power stations, then you can't make the claim that your nuclear power station makes no contribution to global warming. Even under the most optimistic assumptions for the nuclear industry would be a very, very inefficient way of addressing global warming by comparison simply to the most obvious way of addressing global warming, which is increased energy efficiency.
Experts agree that energy efficiency would be one of the first places to start stabilizing climate change. This would reduce the energy demand. In the meantime, a race is on worldwide to develop more efficient ways to generate and store energy from the sun, wind, waves, and Earth itself through geothermal. If we want to avoid catastrophic climate change in the near future, we have to start making lifestyle changes now. I visited Sustainable Energy Africa at the Green Building, designed by some of their members. It is one of the only buildings in Cape Town installed with a two-way electricity meter, which runs backwards on sunny days when their solar panels are generating more energy than the building needs.
What we have here is a record of the total amount of power that our photovoltaic panels have generated and fed into the grid. The central skylight is extremely important in using natural lighting. You know, we very seldom turn particularly the central lights on. The other thing is a lot of windows, so we get natural ventilation, so there's absolutely no heating and air conditioning. There's a natural vent for hot air that rises up through there. So as the building heats up, it rises and it's got places to go. All the lighting around the building is energy efficient lighting using compact fluorescent bulbs. Photovoltaic is on the roof upstairs, and then the other key technology, of course, is the solar water heater, which is on the roof.
Sarah Ward is one of the founding members of the organization and serves on the Cape Town City Council. She is the author of a book which explains how generating energy locally can be more efficient than the current centralized high-impact energy system, which is set up to feed big industry. I asked her about this.
At the moment we get most of our power from Mpumalanga. We get some of it from Coburg. These are big power producers, big coal power plants or nuclear power plants. What would be a much better situation is to have locally produced power from resources that are available around Cape Town, for instance. So if you had houses with solar panels on them and those houses were allowed to feed the grid, you'd get a supply of electricity into the grid. Now they do that in some countries around the world.
One obvious way to develop energy locally in Cape Town is through wind power. South Africa has the perfect climate for wind and solar energy, but renewable projects like this one have not had much backing. After 12 years of delays, the first wind farm in Africa was opened in 2008.
Actually, it's only a small stepping stone into what we want to do, which is another 6 turbines. And we also have on the neighboring farmer permission to build another 10 turbines. And we have quite a lot of other projects on the drawing board. We have a project just along the coastline here, the Stellenbosch wave converter, where we want to generate electricity from wave. And we have a fantastic source of sun to generate electricity from sun as well. But at the moment the wind is the most economic way and the technology is available. We buy them from the shelf and we erect a small wind farm like that in 12 months. There's no other technology where you can bring megawatts on the ground, generation capacity at that in such a short time.
This is positive news, but critics complain that renewable energy cannot fulfill the needs of big industry. I visited Professor Harold Winkler at the Energy Research Centre at UCT. He is a well-published authority on the subject and a member of the International Panel on Climate Change.
I think what's very important is to kind of dispel this myth that somehow renewable electricity is too weak. That's absolute rubbish. Once you've generated electricity, the electricity is the same. It goes through the grid, and in fact, from the customer point of view, there's no way of knowing whether the electron that you receive, which power plant it comes from, because it's gone through the grid into which you fed, mainly coal-fired electricity, a little bit of nuclear, and hopefully more and more renewables. The key issue that is real, the key technical issue that is real, is about the availability of the resource. On average, wind turbines have an availability factor of maybe around 20–25%, which does mean that for the same amount of electricity, you need maybe three times more capacity. Now one of the other big advantages of solar thermal electricity is that with some new technology of storing the electricity for a short space of time, you can get that availability factor up to about 60%, some say even 80%, so that it's much more comparable to a coal-fired plant.
In spite of the amazing potential for renewable energy solutions, progress in South Africa is slow because of the way the system is set up. This is coming into question as independent power producers have been prevented from making progress at a time of energy shortages when every bit of electricity generated should be welcomed.
Are we likely to see the Eskom's monopoly in this industry being broken and allow more private players into energy generation?
Well, government has opened up for the participation of the private sector. Hence, we are now busy addressing the issue of the tariff of electricity in the country, so that you create this enabling environment for the private sector to come and participate. The second thing is the fact that we made Eskom a single buyer. As a result, then anybody who generates would have to sell to Eskom. And the investors have been very concerned about that, saying that they would rather want to sell to the grid than sell to Eskom. And they see Eskom then as a monopoly. So it's an issue that we are addressing.
What's important is to create the conditions in which others can also generate electricity. If you had a household that had invested in some form of its own electricity generation, and right now a lot of households are doing that, and at the same time, you're talking about basically having these so-called smart meters. There's nothing technical stopping you from selling, if you're generating, say in summer, surplus electricity, more than you need in your own household, selling it back to the grid, and then buying when you don't have enough, maybe on a cold winter day. So that basically the meter, to put it simply, the meter can both run forwards and backwards.
If we take it to the household level, suddenly there is hope. Perhaps the solution is to break away from the old centralized system of energy management, which has always been controlled by Eskom, and give the power to the people in the form of local, community-based energy generation and energy-efficient living. I asked Sarah Ward about how this could work.
The local government really has a responsibility and a need to take on power issues. They can lead the way. They're the ones who need to be introducing solar water heater bylaws. They need to be supporting independent power producers. There's even the possibility that they could have their own feed-in tariffs within a sort of geographical region and say, right, within this area, we're prepared to pay X for any power that's fed from renewable energy sources into the grid. Because we could wait until sort of kingdom come before national government get their act together.
If you had the kind of budget that nuclear energy has, how quickly would you be able to put up a wind farm that can generate a lot of energy compared to, say, building a power station?
We don't need any money from the government. All we need from the government is a political framework whereby an independent power producer can get a price for the electricity which makes it profitable to build wind farms. So there is billions and billions of euros waiting from Europe to come here and build wind farms. All we need is the so-called feed-in tariff.
South Africa reached a milestone on the road to sustainable energy in April 2009. New feed-in tariffs were introduced, opening up the market to independent power producers for the first time. However, in May, Eskom announced that plans to invest in 3 large nuclear reactors, costing around 180 billion each, are to go ahead. Bantam's Klip is the site for one of these reactors. If they find the funds to go ahead and build all these nuclear reactors, as well as the PBMRs, South Africa will be riddled with radioactive sites, from uranium mines to fuel manufacturing plants, to power stations, to nuclear waste dumps. The fishing village near Bantam's Klip is a community that may find themselves with a nuclear power station in their backyard in the future.
My gevoel oor hierdie Bantam's Klip projek is baie hartroerend, want ek wil hê ons moet dieselfde dilemma het soos Danielle in Anniston. Anniston se mense het toestemming gegee Danielle daai bomme daar kan maak en dat toets in die see. Vandag huil Anniston se gemeenskap oor hy visse wat nie meer daar is nie. Ek glo nie dat Danielle het vir hulle die nadele van hy projek gesê nie. Nou kyk vir Buffalo's Bay, waar die spesie van perlemoen, lynvis, alle krikkers en alle tipe seekos wat in ons gebiede is. As hierdie kernkragstasie hier kom, wat 'n nadele gaan vir ons as vissegemeenskappe wees. Hier gaan ons dan nie meer vis kan geoes word nie. Hier sal meer ons kinders kan nie meer gaan al krikke hier naby af gaan haal nie, want waar gaan hy stowwe, die afvalstowwe van die kernkrag na toe. En sal hulle nog vir ons hier laat bly? Kan ons nog dan woonagtig in die gebied is as hulle die kernkragstasie kom. En die gemeenskap se inkomste is net 100%. Ons is 100% afhanklik van die see.
If there's a health risk from a particular technology, namely nuclear power, it may be conceived to be a statistically insignificant risk, but for the family that gets the kid with leukemia, it's a serious problem. What technology are we prepared to accept at what statistical risk to human health relative to another technology which can also produce electricity, but which statistically has less or no risk to human health? So just simply on the health issues alone and not on the economics, which is a separate argument, can we assess nuclear power from a human health perspective rationally and scientifically and take a decision based on the perceived risk and impact on human health for, let's say, the Greater Cape Town community as a case in point. Let's say the Namaqualand community with reference to the nuclear waste dump. You know, these are, we can't ask the Namaqualand community to bear the burden of our risk-taking. We have to ask their permission. And this touches on democracy.
Nuclear energy is extremely expensive, slow to build, and can be incredibly harmful to the environment. Added dangers include core meltdown, which have tragic consequences for generations to come, or simple daily operation, which affects residents and workers who come into contact with radiation. Then there are the headaches of decommissioning and guarding substances like enriched uranium, which is sought after by terrorist groups wanting to build weapons of mass destruction. So the question that arises is, why would the government continue to choose the nuclear path? Minister, although there's been a lot of interest in renewable energy, most of the budget has gone to nuclear energy. Can you explain about that?
Well, in a way, nuclear energy is also clean energy. And indeed, I appreciate that we should have directed more funding. But all of these things have been at a pilot stage in South Africa. They're all new. And indeed, you have to make sure that before you can embark and direct a lot of funding towards a project, it has been tested. And with nuclear, we do have nuclear in the country. It has served this country for about 20 years. And we know that it has potential, so it's easy for us to move in terms of upscaling nuclear as a clean form of energy as well.
The nuclear path was chosen as one of the ways for building a heavy industry based on this principle of minerals beneficiation, adding value to minerals. We don't just send out the raw uranium, we add value to the uranium in this country. It's a very sound policy as policies go, but the net result is that it became a fixed idea. And once it became fixed in ANC policy, and also by extension in government policy, it became, and still is, extremely difficult to roll back. As long as Eskom has a monopoly, and as long as the electricity grid is the only way we can conceive of electricity, we are going to be stuck with these problems.
It is becoming starkly clear that South Africa's energy dilemma is a reflection of an unsustainable economic system which prevails all over the world. It allows the rich to get richer while the poor get poorer and have to bear the brunt of the ecological damage being caused by the industries that make the rich richer. Mahatma Gandhi said, "There is enough in this world for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed." If it is possible to tap into a natural system which constantly renews itself, what is stopping us from utilizing our abundant renewable energy resources? At the World Summit for Sustainable Development in 2002, thousands of people marched together through the streets of Johannesburg in an appeal to world leaders to change the system. A growing awareness of our environmental crisis has begun to move a critical mass of people from all around the globe. People who are prepared to take a stand against decisions that are taken for short-term gain but which may cause long-term pain for future generations.